Hi, and welcome to part 2 of this series of pruning bonsai. If you didn't yet see part 1, you can catch it just here. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the reasons why you wouldn't want to prune your bonsai. I'm going to show you in detail the whole concept of directional pruning, how to do it and where to prune. Don't miss at the very end of the video, I'm going to introduce a new feature which is Tip of the Week. My name's Dave. You're watching Blue Sky Bonsai. Enjoy the video. So what about some reasons when we shouldn't prune? The first reason not to prune is very clear from the energy calendar that we looked at before. Deciduous trees in spring are just pushing their buds. At that point in time, you do not want to prune them. The energy is low in the tree and you're just going to potentially kill or really stunt the growth of the tree that year. We definitely don't want to do major branch pruning just as it's pushing out new buds. Secondly, don't do major pruning at the same time as root pruning because when you chop off some of the roots, you need all the foliage mass you can, all the leaves to keep on photosynthesizing to get energy to create the new roots. After root pruning, when you see that there is new growth on the canopy of the tree, even then, probably best to leave it till later in the year if you really need to prune. Just a caveat here, I did say don't do major pruning at the same time as root pruning. I think we've all done minor pruning. You can quite easily remove a branch or a few leaves here and there. Major pruning, you don't want to get rid of half the tree at the same time. That could make the tree unable to survive the root pruning process. The third reason not to prune a tree, looking back at the energy calendar, is in autumn before leaf fall. Wait till all of the energy has been taken from the leaves at the end of autumn, back into the branches, back into the trunk. Wait a few weeks, even a month, 6 weeks after leaf fall, do your pruning then. If the tree is weak for any reason, don't prune it. Like, for example, if it's had a serious pathogen attack. For example, if it's had an insect infestation, the tree could be suffering, it could be lower energy. Don't go pruning it then. Still needs those leaves to get the energy. Treat the pathogen attack, treat it with whatever you need to. Don't go chopping off the branches at that point. Just need to mention one important caveat. Is that if your tree has a fungal infection, then you do need to remove any infected leaves, any leaves that have fungus on them. You need to dispose of them very carefully so the spores don't go and infect other trees. Another reason not to prune a bonsai, if you've got a tiny tree and it's got a tiny trunk and you want to fatten up that trunk, don't prune. Just let the foliage grow wild. Let it go crazy. That way there will be more energy generated into the trunk and you can get a bigger trunk. I'm going to use this shohin size Chinese Elm to help demonstrate the whole idea of directional pruning and where to prune. Okay, so I'm going to start here and cut in. Here on top we want to prune down to only 2 leaves. The idea there is that we're leaving 2 buds that can create new tiny branches. If I cut down to only 1 leaf, then there's only 1 new branch that can come out. Now maybe you want that, but in the majority of cases, if you want to create lots of fine ramification to make it look like the tiny top of a real tree, you'd want more fine branches. So we want to cut it down to 2 leaves at least, and sometimes even 3 leaves if you want the next branch to come out in a specific direction. Okay, so to demonstrate, I'm going to draw and I'm going to look at it from above. So let's say that's the trunk. And here's my new shoot, going kind of like this, small leaf there. Now, something to be aware of is that underneath each leaf there is a new bud waiting to emerge, just hasn't been activated yet. Every leaf has one. Very occasionally you get a branch where the first leaf does not have one, okay? So something to be aware of, look out for that. But these buds are under every leaf and they are there waiting to become future shoots. So we can use that when we're deciding where to prune, because we've already said we want smaller leaf size, so we want to come back here somewhere and prune somewhere here to keep the leaves smaller. Here on my branch, in the future, I want this branch to bifurcate. I want the possibility of 2 future branches coming out there. On a few occasions you might want a third one. So for example, if I really want my next branch to go in that direction, I want to activate this bud. So in that case, I'm going to make my chop here. I'm going to prune there. Get rid of that. As soon as we prune a bit off the branch, what we're doing is encouraging the branch to activate the next bud. Now the way that works is actually at the prune site, the tree sends a kind of hormone backwards called auxins, and they tell the next bud that's available, we've had damage up here, you need to go ahead, you need to develop. So in this case, I want my branch to go that way. However, what happens in most cases is that I only want 2 active buds to be there from each branch. In that case, I'm going to make my chop here. And this is the most normal way of pruning. If the conditions are right, and if you do need to prune your bonsai, let it grow quite a bit to strengthen this little bit of branch, and then consider that is the basis for a new branch. So from here, I've chopped there, and in the future, what I'm going to get, activating this bud, get a new branch there. Some point in the future also, this bud will be activated, get a new branch there. And the same process will go. These will grow their leaves, and then next year or later this year even, for example, we might be able to do the same thing here and say 1, 2 leaves, chop there. This was viewing the tree from above. Let's look at the same thing from the side. This would be a primary branch. It's forming the kind of the skeleton of the tree. If the trunk is the backbone, then the primary branches are forming the skeleton. So do we want it to be so short? Well, we can go back and say, if it was a low down branch, then maybe not. Maybe we want that to be longer. But higher up in the tree, yeah, we want it to be short. We want to keep it nice and compact. So I'm going to chop just there. All of that goes. Let's use the board rubber to make it go. I'm left with my 2 leaves. Each has its bud. Those buds get activated. Subsequently will produce their own new shoots. So at that point, I'm able to start looking at how long my skeleton of branches is going to be, but also the direction that I want those next secondary branches to come from. One more thing that's pretty important to say at this point. Just here, we're talking about a broadleaf type of tree with an alternating leaf pattern. For example, the Chinese Elm, which is used for loads of bonsai. I've got quite a few of them here. Also quite common, opposite leaves. So if I've got my new shoot here, my opposite leaves are going to look something like this. And again, gradually getting bigger. With opposite leaves, in some ways it's a bit easy because you can go right back to here. You've got a bud underneath each of those leaves, underneath the petiole of the leaves. As long as you've got 2 new buds there waiting to be activated just underneath those leaves, then we can actually bring our pruning right back to the first 2 leaves here. The same applies, you will activate 2 buds there. The usual case is that when they're opposite leaves and you do a pruning, you actually activate both of those buds at the same time. So here I'm going to cut down to 2 leaves. This one here, this one's pointing directly upwards, which I don't really want. I'm just going to leave this as only 1 leaf so that I can only get one branch that will come outwards here. So I'm going to prune this one back to 2 leaves as well. Here's a long one I can take to 2 leaves. Let's turn it round. Here's one going out. I'm going to cut that one back to 1, 2, 3 leaves. Another one here. Let's cut this one back to 2. Likewise this one. Now here what we've got is one tiny leaf at the beginning of the branch. Then a second leaf, and the second leaf comes outwards, which is the direction I want. So I'm going to cut it there. Okay, it's already looking a bit more like a tree. And now the lower branches I'm not going to do that much on because we want them to thicken up a bit more. However, when I look at this as a representation of a real tree, what I see is I have a back branch here, and for me the back branch, it's just getting a bit big, a bit too chunky, a bit fat, so I'm going to keep trimming that nice and short. Leaves. This branch going directly upwards, so I think I'll cut that one down to only 1 leaf, and then the leaf I've cut it down to is going that way. The leaves are getting quite compact and tight around here, which can look good because they're smaller leaves. The Chinese elm tree is not deciduous because it does keep most of its leaves over winter, but some say it's semi-deciduous because it goes dormant when there's no new growth for a few months and some of the older leaves fall. For the purpose of bonsai maintenance, we can consider it exactly the same as a deciduous tree. Because of its winter dormancy, and in spring it starts pushing out all its new leaves again, just like a deciduous tree. So we can use exactly the same bonsai maintenance calendar as a deciduous tree. On this branch, we have 1, 2, 3 leaves. The second leaf is pointing inwards. Do I really want an inward branch coming here? It's going to shade over these. You don't really want branches coming across the front of the tree. So I'm going to take this one back to 1, 2, 3 leaves. Go. Finished. Now it's finished. Now when it's winter, I'll do another pruning. Here we go. And I'll probably take this branch back quite a long way. In winter, when the tree is almost in dormancy, when it's kind of lost some of its leaves and it's not actively budding, then you can do a much harder pruning on the branches. If I wanted to get rid of a whole branch, I would wait till winter to do it. I wouldn't do that in the summer pruning, because in summer you do still want a nice lot of foliage. You want the leaves to absorb the sunlight, to create the energy that they create through photosynthesis, and that means you want as much leaf mass as you can, while still looking like an enjoyable tree. I like that. It's looking good. Bonsai is a waiting game. Patience is the key. You don't always get back budding, you don't always get the buds activated in just the points you wanted, but if you wait long enough, it turns out right, it turns out good for you. So we've reached the end of this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to hit that like button below so the folks at YouTube know that you enjoyed it. If you haven't yet subscribed to Blue Sky Bonsai, please go ahead and subscribe right here. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.